I actually took my first teacher training in 2001, actually 2000. And then right after it, I was asked to teach prenatal yoga. So it was actually fairly terrifying. I was in, my 20s, late 20s. I really had no idea anything much about pregnancy, except the basics. And so I kind of went in thinking, well, I'm so full of all this like yoga philosophy, right? And I'm just like, oh, they're full of the goddess, like they're so beautiful and radiant and round. And so I went in and I just kind of put that out there and said, you guys don't need anything. You just kind of look inside and, celebrate what's going on. And really, they kind of looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. It really didn't take very long to figure out that pregnancy is not easy. So it comes with just a ton of aches and pains and anxieties and worries. And they're probably, your students are not really sleeping that well. Early on, they've got to pee a lot. Then it just starts to get uncomfortable as things grow. And the anxiety is actually really common. In fact, studies are starting to show that all around birth, the 18 months around birth, anxiety is actually more common than depression. So postpartum depression kind of came to the forefront, and it's still a major, major issue. 1 in 7 women experience it. But anxiety is also becoming a major issue, which is why yoga is one of the many reasons why yoga is really so crucial and amazing for women during this time, just to reset the nervous system. So when that didn't work, I decided, well, I'll just teach gentle yoga. And at the time when I went to other people's prenatal yoga classes, like that's basically what people were doing, teaching gentle yoga, kind of like, just be careful and, don't work too hard. But that didn't make much sense to me because, of course, we're basically going to be carrying a bowling ball around. It seems to me we need our strength. Labor is kind of like the most intense physical experience many women will have, very similar to a marathon. So not just strength, but endurance is really important. I kind of used my alignment background. So I was a certified Anusara instructor, and I applied therapeutic alignment. So because there are so many changes, and we'll talk about this, there's lots of aches and pains. So I said, okay, let's do low back today. And we would just have like a therapeutic class. I still felt like I was missing something. And it wasn't really until I started asking this question of what is the opportunity that pregnancy presents us with? Instead of just being so nervous, and it's not just us, it's like our whole culture. It wasn't until 2002 that the American gynecological board basically said, it's okay for a pregnant woman to have 30 minutes of exercise a day if everything is healthy, if she's healthy. So 2002 was when they said a half hour of exercise for pregnancy is fine, which makes you kind of wonder, what exactly was happening before 2002? And, mostly it's you should rest, dear, kind of thing. And there are a lot of myths going around in different cultures about if you reach up to a high cabinet, you could go into early labor. If you do running, you could harm the baby because of high impact. And then there's sort of the exaggerations of what is actually true. It is true that baby is a little bit warmer than we are, temperature-wise, like 2 degrees. So then there are these fears around getting, sweating at all, right? So what is true, what is not true, very important for us as teachers to understand. So we're not passing on more of the fear, right? That your pregnant mom is already feeling, and it's just around in general. So for me, I ended up actually creating this group visit and prenatal yoga program at Kaiser. And I worked there for 6 years, and we had all these groups of mamas come in, and we would have like the doctor pulling people off for a quick little check in the corner, but all of us could sit and talk about a yoga theme and what was happening at that time, because of course everyone's at exactly the same weeks. So everyone could share with each other. And then the doctor would come back, and instead of the usual one-on-one 15-minute, traditional visit, it's like 40 minutes of really good talk. And then we got to do some prenatal yoga at the end. And of course, it was amazing. And when people came back, and we were doing a study, actually, it was for my master's, they used words like life-changing. And when I really looked at what had happened here, I saw that the community that you can build during that time, because everybody's going through all these changes, and we are in some ways more motivated to make positive change in our life. Pregnant women are like listening. Like, I think that's partly why I wanted to teach prenatal yoga, besides the fact that they just asked me to for some reason. I just felt like in a regular class, you may be, talking about courage, right? And maybe somebody's thinking, I'm gonna ask for that raise or whatever. Not that that's not important, it is. But like in the prenatal class, everybody's thinking the same thing. Like, how am I ever going to get this baby out of me? And like, okay, I'm going to breathe into my heart center. And the teacher says that's where the courage is, right? So it's like everything's a little bit heightened during pregnancy, which I really like. And for me, I realized that that's really the opportunity. Is like, it's one of these doorways in life that we have at different times, right? It's not the only time we can step through, but most of the times are bad news, right? Most of the times that we suddenly realize, wow, I'm completely not in charge. Bigger things are happening here. And I do have this opportunity, though, to respond from a really authentic place and kind of co-create an experience that is meaningful to me. A diagnosis or something like that. So pregnancy is this good news, and yet at the same time, it's like, whoa, I'm not having to micromanage this at all. This is something just happening. And yeah, so I can kind of step into that highest part of me that understands that I'm bigger, right, than my thoughts or my old habits, and lean into the person I want to be. So for me, what I was looking for were basically then, what are the principles here that we can follow? And I am absolutely getting to your very specific questions about do's and don'ts, and all that stuff. And I learned them, and I took a weekend workshop early on in prenatal. But for me, it was kind of like, okay, remember about warrior 2, about the groins. It's really important, not to go too deep. And remember in, triangle pose, people tend to hyperextend. And it was like, 108 poses and 3 times that of things to remember. What I wanted to figure out were these principles that are always true, right? And so that no matter in what pose people were in, even if they're not on the mat, we can use these principles to guide us to step through this doorway, right? To use this opportunity to become our highest self. So over time, I took the original Anusara alignment principles, and sort of they transformed after many years of working with pregnant women. So I'm going to give you 3 of these principles, and within each of those, we're going to talk specifics. Obviously, there's way more than we could ever do here, but it is going to be a Q&A in that, first of all, your questions are welcome. And second of all, at the end, it's going to be a Q&A, but I am actually going to be asking you some questions because some of you may be able to already use these principles to answer the questions you may have had, right? That's my goal. Teach you to fish, not give you a million little details to try to remember. So here's the first one, which we have already touched upon. We are not in charge. And what that translates to, like physically on the mat, is make space for baby. So make space for baby. It is so foundational. You could literally say it like 10 times in your prenatal class. Every single time it would have a positive effect on your mama. On one level, we're talking physically. So baby really needs space in the back of the body. I didn't do a scientific study on this, but over the years, when somebody says my baby's breech, first place I look is the back ribs. And often I see that everything's being pulled forward. So exhaling, kind of like a little cat pose, just the middle of the back, expanding it back. Very important, very useful, you know, for many reasons, but baby-wise, yeah, baby gets a lot more space to move around. But also make space for baby is true on multiple levels. So we're going to get women who are on this spectrum where, like, on one side, we have somebody who is just putting her head down. She's going to keep her practice exactly as it is, and she's going to go, go, go. And in this case, like, we may want to encourage her, like remind her that she has a partner now, making space for baby in her mind, in her practice, and ultimately in her heart, right? Because when we're practicing and we're like, you know, every once in a while we say, you know, bow in, which naturally gives us space in the back body, makes, you know, say hi to baby, right? Every once in a while we get this hit, this wave of like love, like a rush of awareness that this is happening, and we develop this connection, right? So even just, you know, giving your student just a little, not like, oh, you're doing it wrong, but like if she's in a lunge, right, and then and you invite her to have both hands inside the front foot, it's just her belly isn't bunking, but it's like this remembrance of like, oh yeah, making space for baby. So that's one side of the spectrum, right? So you have your strong yogi who has her practice and doesn't want anything to change, and you can invite her to just make some little shifts, even if it's just, you know, a little touch on the back, just like when we do that, there is just a natural softening. So often we make space for baby naturally without any verbal cues. On the other end of the spectrum, we have someone who maybe is terrified of doing anything. And, you know, she's just really scared. So for this person, make space for baby may mean reminding them that, like, you don't actually have to do anything else. Like baby, like if you think about, like, you know, changing the direction of a waterfall, right? I mean, when nature sets her mind to do something, she's pretty much going to do it in the way she's going to do it. And there's not that much we can do to change it. So this is a nice metaphor, I think, and just in general, even for us, to feel confident and calm and recognize nature's going to do her thing. Let's just give her space, right? If you're wondering, is this a prenatal pose? You know, is this okay to do? The question is it making space for baby? Okay, so it's not that everything that isn't making space for baby is bad and wrong. So I've had people come up to me and they're like, well, what do you think of, like, you know, so-and-so, she's pregnant and she doesn't go to prenatal yoga classes, and she's like doing, you know, crazy back bends and stuff. And my response is just, I think that's amazing. I think it's wonderful. I love yoga, and I love when people love their practice. And chances are she's so advanced, she's probably listening inward, and she can tell when things don't feel bad. At the same time, I would say that that person is missing out on an opportunity. It's an opportunity to connect to other mamas. It's an opportunity to learn some techniques that will make her practice a little easier, especially as she grows. And eventually, it's probably going to be the only thing she can do, the prenatal yoga. So instead of starting in the third trimester, why not add it into your week right in the beginning, get to know some friends, and make some new mom friends. There's all sorts of tips you get about, preparing for labor and stuff. So that's kind of my attitude, is like, absolutely do your thing. And chances are, again, we're not going to be hurting baby. Even like most of us know, twisting, not really a prenatal pose, right? A lot of us learn in our first teacher training, it's like wringing out an old dish towel, right? We don't want to wring out our organs here, right? So generally what we say is, don't twist across, right? Twist open. However, if you are familiar with these principles, and one of them really being like basically the equivalent of make space for baby, but expanding the inner body. So there's this, right? So I'm twisting across, or basically exhaling into the back of the body, making space. And now it's a prenatal pose. What did I change? Not really much of anything. It's more what I'm doing inside, right? Now, if someone's in you, and somebody did ask this, okay? So Susan asked if they don't tell you, like you're just teaching a regular class, and like, somebody tells you on their way out, oh, I'm pregnant. And you're like, oh my God, what did I do? I did all these twists, I did abdominals. So again, like, this person made the choice not to say anything. Chances are they're pretty early, right? So in the first trimester, even halfway through the second, how big is baby really? How much space does baby need? I mean, like, this, growing into like this. I think chances are baby's going to be okay. I would say, yeah. So, okay. So I'm going to keep cruising through here. So we talked about twists a little bit. The exhale is where we can make space in the back of the body. For back bends, in order to keep spacious, right? Instead of going for like a short, high rainbow, we want to go for a long, low bridge kind of thing, right? So we're going to lengthen from tailbone to heel, and then we're going to lengthen the other way, right? So we're expanding the space for the baby. Actually, this is what we do anyway, right? So we talked about what an opportunity pregnancy is for the mama, but I would say it's an amazing opportunity for us as teachers, because again, with that heightened kind of sense of like, it really matters, right? Part of that is like, okay, so there's aches and pains. And so if we're not in alignment in a pose, like a pregnant woman is really going to feel that. And so as a teacher, we can really develop a lot of clarity on what we're doing inside each pose, working with pregnant women. All right, so make space for baby. Second principle is stability before freedom. So stability before freedom, what does that mean? This is true always for every body, that we want to draw into the center, we want to engage, we want to steady ourselves before we expand, before we go for freedom, before we stretch. For pregnancy particularly, it's really important, especially starting in like the second trimester. So the hormones have really kicked in, relaxin, progesterone, and what they do is they work on the front of the pelvis. There's a joint like this, right, in the front of the pelvis called the pubic symphysis. It's not glued together, it actually moves. And with these hormones, it actually starts to come apart. And that's a good thing, because otherwise baby's head would not really fit out the door. However, oddly, the body doesn't quite focus on just that joint. The hormone works on every single joint in the body. So the knees, the wrists, all the vertebrae, ankles, all of them are vulnerable and weak when we're pregnant. So it's particularly important that we know how to stabilize a nearby joint before we're stretching the muscle. We want to be stretching like the body of the muscle, right? Instead of like the attachment. So if we overstretch the shoulder blades come off the back, there's an instability, and often we feel it in the wrist, right? We're in downward dog, we're just dumping into the shoulders, and then everybody comes out and they're like, oh, kind of hurt. So we want to learn how to stabilize shoulder blades on the back. And it's very specific. So while we start with these general principles, we're going to get really specific in our understanding. It's not take your shoulders back, although sometimes that can help someone who really has no idea how to move shoulder blades, right? It's not even squeeze your shoulder blades together, although I'll admit, I definitely say that to people just to get those muscles activated. It's draw the bottom tips of your shoulder blades down and in and broaden the top, okay? So obviously, you know, we can't go really deep into this, but there's a lot there. Generally, just to know, engage muscles before we stretch them, right? So we don't want to stretch a passive muscle, because what's going to happen is it's just going to pull on the joint. So we want to find the natural curves of the spine. The body is stable when we return to the natural curves of the spine. So a lot of us learn, like when we're doing core work, flatten your back. So press your lower back down into the floor and then do your crunches. But what are we doing? There's a natural curve, right? We're flattening it. Right? So here's the lower back. It has a curve in, lordotic curve. When we flatten it, we actually press those vertebrae back, and they squish in the back because they're made to sit in a certain way, in a curve. So then we can be creating SI pain and nerve pain and disc problems and all that stuff. Again, as usual, it's even more important for pregnant women because the belly is so heavy, it actually, you would think that, oh, well, it's going to create this big curve, right? It's going to start to bring everything like forward. But that's not really what it happens. It actually brings the thighs forward. So you're standing and, you know, your hips and your thighs and everything go forward, in fact, flattening the lower back. So it's important to learn how to come back into the natural curves of the spine. For instance, when you're in bridge pose, right, you just have them drop their hips a couple inches. And so then it's like, you can say like, it's like you're in a hammock and you just settle down. And all of a sudden there's this nice curve. Then you can lengthen the tailbone and lift from below, right? So you're not like squeezing your belly and you're not squeezing your butt. You're just continuing to make space for baby, but from this kind of stable place of having this nice curve, engaging your muscles, and then lengthening more. Okay, so question from a different Sarah: best way to stretch a pregnant mama's back? Yes, so perfect. So, oh yeah, so Sarah asked an inversion question. Did I have another? Oh no, Susan. Okay. Anyway, so you want to make the curve first. Always, always, always. So best way to stretch pregnant mama's back. You know, downward dog, child's pose, hold on to the wall, all of it. Bending your knees and stretching your sitting bones back. So that lower back length, at the same time trying to keep a little fullness in the back ribs. That's the best way. So I like just having them down, interlaced fingers, forearms and knees, the butt sticking up. You can press the thighs back and just lengthen that way. And then you just do that principle, find the curve and then lengthen, you know, in every single pose. So it's, again, it's not really the pose, you know, you can be really therapeutically healing your back while you're driving. Just roll up a towel, put it in your lower back, stay lifted and stable. And of course, you can be hurting yourself on the mat. So if we round our back, our lower back, and then, you know, try to stretch it, or do, I had a woman who came, she spent a lot of money on this core strengthening program after she had her baby. And it involved wrapping her belly and doing 1,000 crunches a day. Not at the same time, but wrapping most of the day. So basically, what she was doing by wrapping, and I mean, nothing against wrapping for a few days. Wrapping can be really nice to get the muscles to start to move back. While you're wrapped, your muscles aren't having to do any work, right? So her muscles are getting weaker. Then the only time she's really using them is when she's rounding and losing her curve. And she was in agony when I saw her, just agony. But the nice thing is, when we move them back into alignment, it's almost instant. It's just like, oh, thank God. So then it's just kind of retraining ourselves to sit in a different way and to do our yoga in a different way, even do our crunches in a different way. Okay. And then, so yeah, oh, and Maggie, sciatica. So sciatica is interesting because it's the result of instability, right? So something happens. So, okay, so just to explain, we have skeleton bob here. We have the sides of the pelvis and we have the sacrum, right? And again, this is a joint, the SI joint, and they move freely, ideally, right? Except when they don't. So what can happen is they just kind of slip, right? And then what you get is the nerves coming from the brain through the spine, down through the legs, get impinged, and we get burning pain down the leg. So I would say there's two things we can recommend for a pregnant woman with sciatica. One is get thee to a chiropractor. So there are, you know, there are definitely SI adjustments that like we learn in the training. But honestly, I find when I'm putting somebody's sacrum in who's not pregnant, I am using a lot of my body weight and really pressing down on them, and they're on their belly. So the best one we can't really do. And then there are others that are lighter. In fact, there's even a twist that I can show you. You have to understand what's happening with the legs that can sometimes click it. But I would say we all need a team when we're pregnant and have this person add a prenatal chiropractor to their team, then come back to you and create stability, right? You find the curve, because often it can actually happen just because we're kind of rounding the lower back, and thus we're moving the sacrum in a way it doesn't want to be moved. So we're going to find the curve and we're going to create stability. How do we create stability? Use a block. Use a block, 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 and everything. Put a block between the inner thighs. Cat cow with a block, downward dog with a block, standing with a block. Hugging in, hugging in, hugging in will create that stability, especially something like twists. Engage, hug the midline, draw into the center, then go ahead and twist. So when we twist, we're not trying to push our sacrum apart, right? We're trying to create stability, especially for our mama. Okay, and the other Sarah said inversions. What do I think about inversions? So, inversions are lovely and wonderful. I had a friend, I still am friends with her. She came to my prenatal class when actually we were both pregnant. And I do inversions with them. I have them do L pose up the wall, but I'll just invite them just to do one foot on the wall, push it in, and lift the other one up, and then come down. And then the other one and lift. And then often people will be like, I can do both feet, and I let them do it. but I don't necessarily try to push them into getting up there. Even downward dog is an inversion. It can be nice to get the baby out of the pelvis, and just let baby kind of shift and move into optimal position. So if babies breach, it's really recommended that we do inversions. And what was always recommended is put an ironing board from the floor up on top of a couch, and then lie on it with your hips above your head for 10, 20 minutes a day. Let baby get out of there, and then maybe baby will move into optimal position. Maybe not. Maybe there's a reason that baby doesn't want to go there. In fact, for this person, the cord was wrapped around him, and she ended up having a cesarean. So time number 2, she got pregnant. She came back to my class. She said, Jess, I am not going to do inversions this time. I don't know if that was it, but I'm just going to stay away from it. I said, absolutely. I respect that. Go with that. This time, her daughter's cord was not only wrapped around her, but tied in a knot. Like the doctors had never seen that before. So this is all to say, again, it's not really up to us. Nature's doing her thing in there. And it's like a bubble in a bottle. Like it's really just, babies, babies just not necessarily going to be affected by what the outer body's doing. We don't want to do any poses where the mom could potentially fall, right? So that becomes much more of an issue here than normal, not necessarily because something terrible could happen, right? So I remember being in a prenatal class. I had given a short training, like a 1 hour. And at the time I was like, you guys don't worry about it. It's, it's fine. Like I was emphasizing the not fear side of things. And then I took somebody's class when I was pregnant who had been at that training. She had everyone go to the wall and either do a handstand or a headstand. And she didn't show anything, and she didn't do partner support. And it was a long room with like 20 mats. And like next to me, I see this woman copying someone else walking up the wall, thinking that's what she's supposed to do, and then slam, her feet come down like really hard. So if we could, basically, end our pregnancy with slamming our feet down, there probably would be all sorts of different kinds of clinics, right? There are not. And there's no studies that show that this could hurt the baby. Physical trauma for sure, but like landing hard, we don't know. But see, that's the thing. We don't know. And what we don't want to do is cause fear, anxiety, alarm for our pregnant mamas. So God forbid something does happen and she has a miscarriage, and then she always has to wonder, was it that thing that I did, right? So we don't want to give people anything to worry about. That's why when I teach inversions, or I teach anything with any kind of potential fear, even cobra, sometimes people are like, oh, I felt like a really big stretch here. So I'm going to go the least common denominator, right? I'm going to teach the most basic version. And then I'll say, if you want to, if you feel comfortable, here's the next step, right? So in a regular class, we might go, for like middle of the road, right? We're going to do this. If you need to modify, you can come down here. If you want to go more advanced, this is where you go. In a prenatal class, I'd say go with the lowest, right? And then invite them to keep going. What we're also doing is teaching them something really important, that nobody else knows how to do this better than they do, right? Their body's going to tell them. And what a great preparation that is for being a mom, when everybody tells you how you should be doing this. By then, we want them to have that experience of listening inward and trusting what they're getting from their inner wisdom. Okay, so third and final principle, and then I want to tell you about some other trainings that are coming up and other resources for you. This one is about what exactly the opportunity is, right? And the way that I articulated it's become the ma you want to be. So first, we have to talk about the syllable ma. So the syllable ma in basically every language means mother. I mean, literally, like I've seen the list, it's just like crazy, all these different non-Latin based languages. And in the language of yoga, Sanskrit, it also means like the highest, most powerful, wise, loving, or nurturing, right, of any group. So, for instance, Mahavahashrota means the digestive channel, right? So in Ayurveda, this is the seat of all health. Mahavahashrota. It's like this is it. This is the channel, right? Ma Kali, the mother of all goddesses. So the big secret about Ma Yoga is that while people come to it for prenatal, in the process, we learn how to turn this nurturing energy, this mothering energy onto ourselves, right? Because in some ways, that doorway for women is becoming their own mother too, is like embodying that highest Ma self for themselves and for their loved ones. So I think in some ways, just becoming aware that there is this kind of feminine side of us, right? So we have the Shiva Shakti, the yin and yang, the more masculine, the more feminine. The more masculine side of us is the more kind of logical, achievement oriented, I got this, taskless kind of thing. Super important as a mom. You got to pick up the kids at the right times. We're very much in our masculine a lot of the times as moms. It's useful when we're doing a task like, let's say we're just having a house built or something, right? You have your list, you have your linear, you have your schedule, all that stuff. The more feminine qualities, this feminine side of us, is more useful when we're doing something more creative, right? So a relationship, writing a poem, visioning a path for ourselves, co-creating our lives, right? So this is the more receptive, listening, kind of feeling our way forward, being okay with not knowing, being okay with not being in charge, being okay with needing each other. So understanding that we can't become ourselves by ourselves, that if we do believe that the universe has support for us, like it's not gonna suddenly come through a hole in your ceiling, right? It's gonna come through connecting with others. That's where we're gonna receive the greatest gifts. So I think that nurturing energy, right? That kind of softer way of turning in toward ourselves, that we can learn because it's what we do for our children. I think that is in some ways the greatest gift of pregnancy, not just for our mamas, but for us as well. So that all said, I'd love to hear any questions. Please put them in the Q&A. But in the meantime, I want to talk to you about my training. I do it once a year, and I have it coming up here in a couple weeks. So I have a special bonus for you guys because you signed up for this. So there's 2 weekends. So one of them is the yoga of pregnancy and postpartum, and the second one is the yoga of healing for women. And the yoga of pregnancy and postpartum is the one where we take a deep dive using these principles as our guide to go through all the trimesters. We learn all the physiological, psychological changes. We learn about adjustments, hands-on, verbal, sequencing, theming, you name it. By the end, we're actually teaching each other prenatal and hopefully feeling very confident about it all. And we go into postpartum and mom and baby as well. So the benevolent chaos of a bunch of babies in the room and how to deal with that. that's May 17th to 19th, and then Prenatal 2 is June 7th to 9th. These are both in LA and at a really lovely studio in Mid-City. And this one is the therapeutic alignment principles that we will use throughout our lives, right? Just knee pain, back pain, ankle pain, all the stuff, but that pregnant women need us to know even more. And then also specific conditions around the 18 months around pregnancy. So diastasis recti, you know, pelvic instability, back labor, round ligament pain, like those sorts of things. I would love for you to take it. If you would like to take one of those, I want to extend to you a $50 discount. So it's just, I'll send this in an email, but three things special. And I also want to gift you with a program. So I have a program where we go into exactly what to do for back pain so that you can know if a student says, oh, my back hurts, you put them right into this rescue pose, and then you know just the 2 action steps to take to kickstart healing and help them feel better. And then just generally sitting, standing, sleeping, what we can do to shift to make sure we're staying, feeling good. And then there's and these are both self-paced downloadable programs with 6 modules and videos and PDFs and guides, the Mom Meditation Program. So this is for very busy mamas. How do we hone down breathing and meditation practices, be able to create a practice that like is so effective and so powerful, and yet we can do it in 5 minutes. It centers us, it grounds us. So I want to gift you with one of those. So basically, if you do sign up, just email me, tell me if you want the meditation or the happy back, and I will give you the code. If you are interested in your RPYT, you can do the whole training. Everything after that is online and on your own time. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen for a sec. And let's see, what is this? No. Okay. And just show you where you can actually find information. So if you go to myyogaliving.com, and here it is. Oops, that's become a mama. So we have our online yoga studio. So if you do decide to purchase this whole program, you get 6 months of access to our online prenatal and postpartum. But if you go to programs and I am a teacher, it talks all about the training. After the 2 weekends, there's my Ayurveda, which is our online off-the-mat practices for mamas. So you learn all about your constitution, how to use spices and foods and daily rhythms, and nurturing practices to stay energized and sleep better and fight colds and all that stuff. And then we apply it all to kids, pregnancy, and moms. There's a one-on-one mentorship. So I'm not going to go into all the details here, but just click Get Info, and it has all the different modules of the program up here.